We like to think humanity is an advanced species, and then someone calls the IT department asking how to water their digital farm. Working in tech support is basically a front row seat to the daily failure of common sense. Get ready for 50 times ordinary people picked up the phone and proved that the biggest glitch is usually sitting right in the office chair. 1. Let's talk about a guy who actually got furious at his dashboard GPS for not reading his mind. He called customer service to complain the map was lagging behind his literal thoughts. This genius was jerking his steering wheel into random turns before the screen even updated, fully expecting a $90 piece of plastic to predict his next move in real time. When the utterly baffled support agent gently explained that telepathy is not a standard feature, the caller scoffed and declared that technology gets worse every year. You really have to wonder if he also screams at his microwave for not knowing he wanted a hot pocket instead of soup. 2. Imagine treating a $2,000 desktop computer like a busted vending machine at a cheap motel. One wildly confident shopper shoved 3 crisp $20 bills straight into his floppy disk drive and then called Amazon to demand why his new toaster had not shipped yet. He honestly believed his PC was built to process physical cash transactions for online orders. The poor tech support guy had to figure out a polite way to tell a grown adult that a hard drive does not dispense exact change, and Jeff Bezos does not employ little elves to collect paper money from inside your tower. 3. There is a level of innocent delusion that is both adorable and absolutely terrifying. A polite caller dialed up support with a very genuine question about receiving a printed certificate for finally finishing the internet. Yes, you heard me right. This person had simply scrolled all the way to the bottom of one single web page and assumed they had reached the absolute edge of the digital universe. It is almost beautiful to imagine a world where the entire World Wide Web is just one really long article. I just genuinely fear for this person whenever they wander into a public library. 4. Typing can be frustrating, but this level of absolute blindness deserves an award. A frantic woman called the help desk in a total panic because she could not locate the key specifically labeled with the word space. She completely ignored the massive blank horizontal bar resting at the very bottom of her keyboard. Instead, she had been typing massive paragraphs as one giant unreadable block of text, exactly like an ancient Roman chiseling a manic manifesto into a stone tablet. The agent probably needed a stiff drink after explaining that the biggest, most obvious button on the entire board actually does something. 5. Long before smartphones made taking photos of yourself incredibly easy, one office visionary decided to use a flatbed document scanner to take a selfie. He literally smashed his entire face against the cold glass plate, kept his eyes wide open, and let the blinding laser sweep across his retinas. He then called tech support, incredibly confused and slightly angry, asking why the resulting printed image looked like a melting goblin from a cheap horror movie. You really have to admire his aggressive commitment to vanity, even if it almost cost him his eyesight and his dignity in front of the entire IT department. 6. Have you ever had to explain the concept of air to an adult? A wildly irate man screamed at a Comcast operator because his high-speed internet was apparently leaking all over his expensive hardwood floors. The bewildered technician had to take a deep breath and gently explain that wireless fidelity is absolutely dry and cannot physically spill out of a plastic box. After a bit of domestic investigation, it turned out his household cat had simply relieved itself directly on top of the glowing router. Amazingly, the guy still had the nerve to demand a full refund for his puddle of wet gigabytes. 7. Security protocols confuse a lot of people, but one customer took password creation into a completely alternate reality. They could not log into their account and aggressively demanded to know the exact keyboard shortcut for typing a capital 6. They did not mean the symbol above the number. They wanted a literal, larger, uppercase integer. The support agent had to hit the mute button to laugh uncontrollably before coming back on the line to explain that mathematics does not have case sensitivity settings. We can only sit back and wonder what a lowercase 9 would even look like in this guy's head. 8. Storage capacity is apparently a completely foreign language to some folks. This was perfectly illustrated by a user who seriously asked an Apple Store employee if they could digitally email him a few extra gigabytes. He fundamentally viewed computer memory as a simple wire transfer between bank accounts. The tech had to break the harsh reality that you cannot just download a bigger virtual closet to stuff all your digital junk into. It makes you wonder if this same guy tries to pour tap water into his television when the actors on screen look a little too thirsty. 9. Gravity and optical sensors are clearly advanced alien concepts for a certain portion of the population. One incredibly frustrated genius called to complain that his computer cursor was completely frozen. It turns out he was holding his computer mouse straight up in the air, pointing it at the monitor exactly like a television remote control. He honestly assumed the foam mousepad on his desk was just a complimentary company coaster for his morning coffee. It is a genuine miracle this individual figures out how to open heavy doors without consulting a highly detailed user manual every single time. 10. Empathy is a wonderful human trait, but it rarely applies to network infrastructure. When an exhausted IT guy walked into the office and announced that the main server was currently down, the company receptionist gasped and frantically asked if she should dial 911 for an ambulance. She lived under the absolute delusion that the server was just a tiny, miserable little man living in the supply closet who pressed buttons all day. She was legitimately terrified about the physical health of a noisy metal rectangle covered in blinking lights. You cannot teach that level of pure, unadulterated ignorance. 11. Nothing screams corporate efficiency quite like misusing expensive hardware. A highly stressed office worker called support to complain that the retractable coffee cup holder on his computer tower was permanently jammed. He was, of course, talking about the compact disk drive. For 3 solid years, this man had been using highly sensitive laser reading technology as a designated resting spot for his sticky morning lattes. You really have to marvel at the structural integrity of late 90s computer parts, considering they survived daily baths of hot dairy and massive amounts of sugar without instantly catching on fire. 12. Do you remember that spectacular internet hoax claiming you could quickly recharge an iPhone by putting it in the microwave? Customer service lines were absolutely paralyzed by thousands of people asking for the exact cooking time to get 100% battery. Let me clear this up for the intellectually challenged. The correct answer is 0 seconds, unless your ultimate goal is a devastating kitchen fire and a melted brick of toxic metals for dinner. It is astonishing how quickly basic survival instincts vanish the moment someone reads a fake infographic on social media. 13. It is slightly terrifying to realize that people who ask these questions share the highways with us and vote in local elections. One caller was genuinely concerned about the structural integrity of his bag, asking if downloading the extended cuts of popular movie trilogies would make his physical laptop too heavy to carry. He lived in a reality where invisible data carries actual, measurable weight, exactly like loading up your car with heavy groceries. Somewhere along the line, physics took a permanent vacation in this person's brain, and we are just lucky he remembers to breathe automatically. 14. Technology naming conventions can definitely be confusing, but this interaction at an electronics store really pushed the boundaries of human logic. A wildly confused shopper walked up to the counter and asked if he needed to schedule an appointment with an oral surgeon to install Bluetooth. He honestly believed the little wireless dongle had to be medically implanted directly into his jawbone. He was completely prepared to undergo invasive dental surgery and probably a local anesthetic, just so he could listen to his favorite podcasts without a tangled cord getting in his way. 15. Anthropomorphism really peaks when you start worrying about the emotional state of a glowing arrow. A very concerned woman called to ask if shifting her computer mouse to her left hand would fundamentally confuse the cursor on her screen. She genuinely operated under the assumption that the digital pointer was deeply, emotionally attached to right-handed individuals. When the agent assured her the arrow would not mind the switch, she let out a massive sigh of relief and whispered that she simply did not want to hurt its feelings. Machines might take over the world, but this lady will definitely be spared. 16. The transition from typewriters to word processors claimed a lot of intellectual victims back in the day. A stressed receptionist called the help desk to request a special industrial solvent because she could not get the correction fluid off her monitor. Instead of using the backspace key to fix a misspelled word, she had taken a literal bottle of liquid whiteout and painted right over the glowing glass screen. The sheer confidence required to permanently deface company property instead of just hitting the delete key is something you almost have to respect in a very twisted way. 17. Software developers really need to tone down their dramatic terminology for the sake of public safety. A terrified man actually dialed emergency services because his desktop threw up a window that boldly proclaimed fatal error. He was hyperventilating, convinced that his beige machine was about to violently explode and take him down with it. The local police dispatcher had to calm him down and explain that while his motherboard might be having a really bad day, his standard office equipment was not quietly plotting a bloody murder in the middle of the living room. 18. Words have power, and sometimes they have the power to cause entirely unnecessary panic attacks. A sweet but highly distressed elderly gentleman called support because he saw a prompt asking if he wanted to execute a program. He immediately associated the word with capital punishment and was paralyzed by the fear that opening his digital card game would legally make him an accessory to a homicide. Tech jargon desperately needs a softer translation for the older generation before someone turns themselves in to the federal authorities for accidentally launching a calculator application. 19. The pursuit of endless energy has baffled top scientists for centuries, but one guy thought he cracked the code right in his home office. He called in incredibly frustrated that his computer refused to boot up. After some probing, the agent discovered the man had plugged his heavy-duty power strip directly into itself, creating a perfect circle of plastic. He sincerely believed he had discovered a massive loophole in the universe to generate free electricity forever. Having to explain the strict laws of thermodynamics to a grown adult over the phone is definitely a unique career milestone. 20. Internet privacy warnings can be a massive letdown if you take things far too literally. One older gentleman clicked the giant accept button on a website banner and immediately called customer care to ask about the delivery logistics. He wanted to know if his fresh-baked goods would be shipped via the postal service or if he needed to drive down to a local bakery to claim them. The crushing disappointment in his fragile voice when he realized there were absolutely zero chocolate chips involved probably ruined that tech support agent's entire afternoon. 21. Remote work really exposed how little some professionals understand about basic camera functions. A very frustrated corporate employee submitted an urgent ticket because his virtual meeting background was totally malfunctioning. It turns out he had taken a printed photograph of a tropical resort and physically taped it to the back of his own skull. He kept spinning around in his expensive ergonomic chair, completely baffled as to why his webcam was not operating like a hovering drone from a video game. That level of spatial awareness is truly something to behold in the modern workforce. 22. Universal remotes are fantastic, but they do not possess the power to control the entire space-time continuum. A bewildered senior citizen was aggressively mashing buttons on his cable television clicker, aiming it dead at his computer monitor to switch from his social media feed to a news broadcast. He firmly believed that all glowing rectangles in his house were subservient to the same piece of plastic. The fact that he was furiously hitting the volume up button in a desperate attempt to make his browser font bigger is just the absolute perfect cherry on top of this digital disaster. 23. The line between science fiction and reality is apparently very blurry for some consumers out there. A highly agitated guy called a local photography shop demanding to know why they refused to print his animated image file. He was not asking for a single still frame. He fully expected the physical photo paper to loop a moving video forever, right there in his hands. He actually started screaming when the clerk politely informed him that the wizarding world of Harry Potter is entirely fictional and enchanted moving portraits do not exist at the local pharmacy counter. 24. Taking metaphors literally is a fantastic way to destroy thousands of dollars in personal electronics in record time. A user stared at a completely unresponsive display and assumed the term frozen screen meant his hardware had literally dropped below a safe operating temperature. He casually asked the support desk if he should toss his entire processor into the kitchen microwave to thaw it out. He was mere seconds away from nuking his motherboard on the baked potato setting, which is undeniably one highly effective method for permanently deleting your entire embarrassing browser history. 25. Context is absolutely everything when you are dealing with an IT help desk. A stressed executive called the tech department asking for immediate assistance to maximize his window because his office was feeling a bit stuffy. He was completely ignoring his software and talking about the giant pane of architectural glass built into his office wall. He dialed the computer nerds instead of building maintenance because, in his defense, it technically was a window issue. He was just trying to troubleshoot the wrong operating system of his entire commercial building. 26. Marketing buzzwords are incredibly dangerous when handed to people who completely refuse to read basic instructions. A furious customer spent 20 minutes screaming that his brand new, highly expensive wireless printer was a complete scam because it would not turn on. The exhausted technician finally managed to ask if the machine was actually plugged into a wall outlet. The ensuing silence on the phone was heavy enough to crush a diamond, right before the guy sheepishly admitted he thought the word wireless meant the device ran on pure magic and required absolutely zero cables to function. 27. Organization is a great habit, unless your specific method involves throwing your entire life into a digital garbage can. A mid-level manager called the tech team completely sobbing because his critical financial files had vanished. It quickly came to light that he was storing years of irreplaceable tax documents inside the recycle bin folder just to keep his desktop looking aesthetically pleasing. He essentially tossed his life savings into a public dumpster and was utterly flabbergasted when the automatic system finally came around and permanently took out the trash. 28. Ergonomics can be tricky, but this setup completely defies all known laws of office furniture. One irate caller demanded to know where the brake pedal was located for her new workstation. It turned out she had tossed her optical mouse onto the carpet and was aggressively stomping on it like an old sewing machine foot controller. She was genuinely furious that furiously clicking the plastic buttons with her big toe was not making the website scroll down like a gas pedal in a Honda Civic. You really have to wonder how she plans to steer the cursor. 29. Dietary restrictions rarely apply to cybersecurity. But try telling that to a hyper-vigilant parent on a mission. A mother fell into a complete panic when a browser pop-up warned her about tracking cookies. She honestly believed her household was being aggressively targeted by sugary digital desserts. She immediately banned her son from using the internet until she could somehow find a low-carb, zero-sugar web browsing alternative. Her absolute dedication to her family's nutritional health was incredibly admirable, even if her grasp on basic computer science was entirely non-existent. 30. Security features sound incredibly hardcore if you have zero clue what they actually do. A terrified man dialed the help desk from his cell phone to ask if he needed to pull the building fire alarm because his settings showed the firewall was active. He was entirely convinced that his plastic computer tower was currently filled with raging, literal flames designed to physically burn any hackers trying to steal his data. He was literally standing in the corporate parking lot, squinting at the office windows, waiting for the local fire department to roll up. 31. There is a unique kind of logic that only makes sense if you completely ignore all 5 human senses. A very sweet grandmother patiently explained to a tech rep that she exclusively types her emails in all capital letters because her grandson has severe hearing loss. In her mind, increasing the visual font size was the exact same thing as cranking up the audio volume on a stereo system. It is an incredibly wholesome gesture born out of pure love, even if it is technically absolute nonsense that just makes her look completely unhinged online. 32. A wildly angry customer demanded a full refund for his laptop because he claimed it was purposely built backwards. He was absolutely furious that every time he moved his mouse to the left, the arrow on the screen moved to the right. The support agent spent 20 agonizing minutes trying to troubleshoot software drivers before finally asking the man to describe exactly how he was holding the device. It turns out, this brilliant individual had the mouse completely spun around, with the cord pointing directly at his stomach. He aggressively argued that the tail should naturally point towards the user, exactly like a real rat. 33. The rapid transition into the digital age left a few traditionalists completely stranded in the past. A lovely older woman called her internet provider because her outgoing messages simply refused to send. The agent discovered she had taken a physical, government-issued postage stamp, licked the back of it, and stuck it directly onto the corner of her glowing monitor. She was sitting there, patiently waiting for a tiny digital mailman to reach through the glass and carry her electronic letter away like it was 1955. It is a miracle she didn't try to shove a wax seal into the disk drive. 34. Routine maintenance is incredibly important, but there is a massive difference between clearing your cache and invoking total nuclear destruction. A very proud user bragged to a support agent that she had finally solved her slow processing speeds by deep cleaning her system. She had taken a heavy-duty, industrial-strength magnet and physically scrubbed the outside of her hard drive tower. The sheer shock on her face when she realized she had just wiped every single family photo and tax return into total, irrecoverable oblivion must have been an absolute masterpiece to witness. 35. The concept of cloud computing is an absolute nightmare for people who take everything completely literally. A very stressed business owner called his IT provider furious because he could not access his company database. He aggressively explained that his technician told him the files were safely stored in the cloud, but there was not a single cloud in the sky that afternoon. He sincerely believed his corporate data was physically floating in the atmosphere and was highly upset that he had to wait for an overcast day just to review his quarterly tax documents. Meteorology and network storage should never mix. 36. Privacy concerns make people do some incredibly unhinged things when they do not understand basic software. A frantic caller contacted support begging for help because all of his passwords had suddenly been stolen by the military. When asked for details, he panicked, claiming that every time he typed his password, the screen just showed a row of tiny stars. He genuinely believed asterisks were top-secret government symbols, censoring his keystrokes in real time. The exhausted agent had to slowly explain that this basic security feature was meant to hide his password from the guy standing right behind him, not the Pentagon. 37. Portability is a fantastic feature, assuming you actually understand that electricity is not biologically stored in a hump. A man angrily reported that his massive desktop tower died immediately after he carried it into the living room. He had violently yanked out every single power cable, working under the bizarre assumption that standard computers store massive reserves of electricity, exactly like a desert camel stores water. When informed that appliances require a constant flow of power from the wall, he complained that it totally defeated the purpose of spending $1,000 on premium electronics. 38. Junk mail is highly annoying, but it rarely violates your deeply held dietary choices. A deeply offended user called America Online demanding a massive cash refund because his inbox was overflowing with spam. The insane twist here is that he genuinely believed the internet provider was physically cramming compressed, low-grade canned meat into the back of his computer tower. He vehemently pointed out that he was a strict vegetarian and felt personally attacked by this delivery method. Trying to explain digital marketing to a guy worried about literal pork processing plants is just an impossible battle. 39. Exterminators deal with physical insects, while IT professionals deal with bad code. But one woman decided to brutally merge the two professions. After a pop-up notified her of a fatal bug in her system software, she bypassed tech support entirely and grabbed a massive can of toxic Raid insecticide. She proceeded to empty the entire highly flammable aerosol can directly into the cooling vents of her processor. The only thing she successfully eradicated that day was her motherboard's ability to ever process a single line of data again. Honestly, her proactive attitude is almost commendable. 40. Some urban legends are completely true, and they serve as a grim reminder of our collective human intelligence. An absolutely hysterical caller screamed at a helpless agent because her brand new keyboard was clearly defective straight out of the box. She had been frantically searching the plastic keys for over 20 minutes, but could not locate the specific button labeled Any to continue the software installation. It is genuinely a modern miracle that some of these individuals managed to successfully navigate the complex daily challenge of tying their own shoes every single morning. 41. The explosive rise of smart home appliances has given incredibly dumb ideas a wonderful place to thrive. One highly ambitious customer actually called corporate support to ask for the installation manual to get Windows 10 running on his new kitchen microwave. He saw the smart label on the box at the store and fully intended to run massive financial spreadsheets while simultaneously popping a bag of buttered popcorn. You really have to respect his aggressive dedication to workplace multitasking, even if his grasp on basic appliance limitations is terrifyingly absent from reality. 42. Cyberbullying usually comes from other awful people on the internet, but sometimes the threat is coming from inside the house. A frail, sweet older lady called the help desk in a hushed whisper, absolutely terrified because her personal computer was suddenly being highly aggressive. She had accidentally smashed the caps lock key and felt like the giant blocky text was literally screaming at her from the screen. She felt deeply, verbally abused by a blank Word document and just wanted to know the polite keyboard shortcut to ask the machine to use its indoor voice. 43. Anatomy and computer engineering rarely overlap, which makes this particular customer inquiry incredibly strange to process. A highly confused hobbyist cracked open his computer case and called the manufacturer demanding to know exactly where the fatherboard was installed. He was staring right at the motherboard, but his fundamental understanding of biology forced him to believe that a machine could not possibly operate without a dedicated male component present. That is a truly spectacular level of traditional gender role projection applied to a flat piece of green fiberglass and some cheap copper wiring. 44. Digital hygiene is usually about avoiding foreign hackers, not actual human pathogens. A very paranoid caller whispered into the phone that she was terrified of opening a forwarded email attachment because the friend who sent it was currently home with the flu. She was sitting at her desk wearing thick yellow dishwashing gloves and physically holding her breath before double-clicking the mouse. The exhausted agent had to gently remind her that biological viruses cannot hitch a ride through a broadband cable, no matter how hard her friend sneezes at their home monitor. 45. Pure vanity knows absolutely no bounds when it comes to suburban property values. A furious homeowner managed to get someone from Google on the line, aggressively demanding that the Street View car turn around and drive back to his neighborhood immediately. He was deeply offended that the cameras had captured his ugly plastic trash cans sitting out on the curb. He firmly believed the global mapping system was a live, continuous photo shoot and demanded a complete scenic reshoot with far superior sunset lighting. You really cannot buy that level of pure, unfiltered entitlement. 46. Nostalgia is a beautiful thing until it completely short-circuits your ability to function in the modern era. An irate customer demanded to know the exact reason why he could not smoothly rewind a live YouTube video using his bulky 1990s VCR remote control. He was aggressively aiming a dusty infrared plastic brick right at his ultra-thin monitor, throwing an absolute tantrum that the web browser was not responding to his commands. Trying to bridge two entirely different centuries of technology with pure rage is a bold strategy that simply never pays off. 47. Voice recognition software has come a very long way, but it is not quite ready to process medieval folklore. One highly determined guy bought a $10 plastic microphone, plugged it in, and spent 10 solid minutes screaming "Open Sesame" at his locked desktop screen. He actually thought modern operating systems functioned exactly like the enchanted, treasure-filled cave from Aladdin. The support rep was forced to mute his headset entirely just to muffle his own hysterical laughter while this modern-day corporate wizard tried to cast vocal spells on a basic password prompt. 48. Spatial geography is not everyone's strong suit, especially when it comes to invisible broadband signals. A highly suspicious subscriber called his local provider to investigate if his painfully slow download speeds were caused by the official internet headquarters packing up and moving to a completely different state. In his mind, the entire World Wide Web was just a massive physical warehouse sitting in a suburban business park. He angrily demanded the new corporate street address just so he could calculate if the invisible data commute was actually worth his hefty monthly subscription fee. 49. The loose terminology of the early 2000s is directly responsible for countless acts of massive property damage. An incredibly confused romantic called tech support while actively holding a blazing butane lighter directly underneath a blank compact disc. He was desperately trying to burn a sweet mixtape for his new girlfriend and took the software instructions completely literally, thinking he needed actual fire to melt the digital music onto the plastic. His new relationship might survive the ordeal, but his hardware warranty was definitely reduced to a pile of highly toxic ash. 50. The abrupt shift to remote work created some truly staggering paranoias in the corporate world. One dedicated employee became absolutely convinced that working from home meant her human resources department had a direct visual feed into her living room. She went so far as to cover her flat-screen television with old newspapers to ensure ultimate privacy. She then physically faxed a Polaroid photo of the covered TV to her boss as absolute proof of her compliance. The poor IT guy had to swear on his life that nobody was tapping into her afternoon soap operas. You survived the absolute peak of human stupidity. Reward yourself by clicking subscribe and smashing that like button before your mouse breaks. Now tell me, if you were forced to work phone support for these exact people, how many minutes would it take before you threw your headset out the window? Drop your absolute breaking point in the comments below. Let's argue.